Paul Brooks is the author of Altered Evolution, the Book of Margaret, a gripping tale of rebellion and survival against ancient reptilian aliens seeking saviours and warriors among humans. And Paul is with us here. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Toby. Thanks so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to talking to you about this.
Yes, and you certainly sound excited about this book. So,
yes.
What was it that sparked the idea for it in the first place?
It's kind of a part of a larger project that myself and my partner have been developing, but the books became an entity in their own right. They were going to be a small part, as I said, but they've just grown and grown and grown.
Yeah.
And really, I suppose the story come from the classic human against aliens, rebellion, warfare, kind of survival story, really, which is, most alien invasion stories are about that. So It came from that, really, and then it grew into this thing that it is now. Really.
Yeah.
And the Book of Margaret, the Altered Evolution is going to be a trilogy. I'm writing the second book now. But the Book of Margaret originally was just going to be a prologue to this second book. It's a bit of a backstory, really, for what's happening now, because the Book of Margaret is set in the past.
Yeah.
So the next book, which is Remember the Rebellion, which will be out shortly, that is set in the present, and then there's a book set in the future as well. So it's come from that. So the prologue was going to be about 5,000 words.
Wow.
So I started it off with just this idea of, giving people some kind of information about where it's come from and how they got here, and how this relationship between the aliens and the human hunter-gatherers, as we were at the time when they arrived some 12 to 15,000 years ago. And I started writing it, and it just grew and grew and grew. And it didn't stop.
Yes. As you've mentioned, of course, the humans in the book are depicted as simple hunter-gatherers. How did you develop that dynamic between the aliens and humanity?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the story really within the book, when you get to read it, what I've included is it's not just kind of a fictitious story. There are elements in that book that you can read and people will go, "Oh, I've heard of that before."
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you can then go and research it, because some of the information that's in the book I've woven into it are things that have happened in our previous history that are unexplained, and potentially could be explained by an alien invasion.
Yes.
How we made these big leaps in our knowledge, how there's gaps of time in our knowledge, and where has this stuff come from? Surely we must have had some idea of splitting the atom, for example. Where did the seed idea of that come from? Things like that. So it kind of grew from there, really. So the aliens, when they arrived, they were looking for a species that they could be sort of take control of, create warriors from the male species and blend and breed with the females to expand their race. But essentially, the aliens then, or one of the aliens, Margaret in this case, she recognized the potential of humans for development and protecting their species in the future. So I kind of built the story around that, really. There's the two dynamics of the first council sister, who turns out to be Karen, and then who is kind of, she's the matriarch, she's the leader, she's a warmonger, she's a bit of a psychopath as well in the book. And then, of course, Margaret, she is a scientist, and so she recognizes the potential of the human race. And then there's this clash between those two, and then that's the kind of carries on through the trilogy, really.
And it's quite a common theory, isn't it, that aliens were somehow involved in parts of our history. Do you think there's maybe an element of truth in that?
Well, I mean, you look what's happening in the US with the US Congress meeting on the UFOs and being overly and highly transparent.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, it's all speculation. There's no as such hard evidence, if you like. But if you think about the pyramids in Egypt, for example, how were they built? We don't really know that for sure. There's lots of speculation and ideas from engineers about how they were built. And what were they for? I mean, they clearly weren't tombs. They, built for the pharaohs, apparently. But there's speculation that they were energy generators and things like that. So where did that come from? How were they built? Who built them? When were they built? Again, if you look at the Sphinx, there is speculation that that is thousands of years older than sort of traditional science says. So there's lots of ideas and lots of reasons that we are who we are today because of some manipulation of our DNA, our history in the past.
The description of the book ends with this phrase: "This is their story. It could also be ours." What are you suggesting with that? I mean, is it also a suggestion that the alien thing could be true and could happen at some point to us?
Yes, and do you know what? I don't really want to answer that, and there's a reason for that, because it finalizes the story. It is their story, but it could also be ours, because in the final book, again, without giving too much away, it kind of pulls everything together, and it kind of makes that statement a lot more understandable, really.
Yeah.
Because this could be our story. This could be, and certainly in the Book of Margaret, Altered Evolution, the Book of Margaret, it could be our beginning. In this next book, Altered Evolution, Remember the Rebellion, this could be our present story. And then the next book will be the end of the beginning, if you like. So it's kind of a very circular. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's a little bit intriguing. I don't want to give too much away, because the story, it just evolves and it grows. And it's quite interesting, because this is going to sound a little bit odd, but I actually don't know where the story's going.
Yeah.
It almost kind of writes itself. I have an idea, and then I'll start writing, and it will just grow and grow and grow. It grows kind of organically, really. So I don't have lists of plot points and all of that sort of stuff like J.K. Rowling does, or somebody like that.
Yeah.
I have a seed idea, and it just grows and grows and grows. So I don't want to answer the
question. Well, do you worry that one day the inspiration will just stop coming and maybe you will have to write down plot points and things like that?
No, is the short answer, because the story is so big. I mean, it's bigger than everyone I've spoken to. They throw ideas. I mean, I've got on my desk here, I've got notebooks. I've either got book ideas written on the boards. I've got pin boards on my other screen here.
Yeah.
And so there's lots and lots and lots of different ideas that can all have an element in the book, in other books, in other stories that can come out of it. So it's not going to end anytime soon, let's put it that way.
Now, this book seems to blend a lot of elements like action, science fiction, and even some philosophical themes. So how did you manage to balance those different aspects to create a cohesive story?
Yeah, I mean, it follows the kind of the standard 3-act process, if you like, of a beginning, middle, and an end. So in each third of that, each part of that, it sort of conforms with what's required in all of those to make a really interesting story, to keep people reading. But I think, I wrote it from Margaret's perspective, or she is second council sister initially, and she becomes Margaret later on in the book. And that's the kind of transition from the alien element, where there's completely aliens, into the human side of things. So I kind of blended it in that way a little bit. But I wrote it from her perspective, and she kind of tells me her story.
Yeah.
So I didn't go out specifically to write a story that had a philosophical element in it. It just kind of happened.
Yes.
The story goes and goes and goes.
Because she is telling you the story, do you hope that kind of makes the character believable? Because even you're believing in her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she really is. It's hard to describe. For example, if she's having a conversation, when I'm writing it, in the book where there's all the dialogue going on, I'm actually listening to it in the back of my head and then just writing it out. I'm always plagiarizing my own subconscious, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's really, does she sound real? Does she do things that an alien would do, who is a sympathizer with the humans, and there are lots of references to those sorts of things in other sci-fi adventures, books, films, and TV series, and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of well known in terms of how that kind of happens. but again, it's a very natural process. I try not to force it because it would just sound odd, I think. So yeah, I just let her tell me.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that there is a next book coming.
Yeah.
Where are you with that at the moment? Have you started working on it?
Oh yeah, I remember the Rebellion, the next book. That's probably going to be another 2 or 3 months. There's some work to do on it a little bit, really, in terms of blending the stories together, because in Remember the Rebellion, there are now the 9 saviors. They are the 9 rebel leaders of the human race, if you like. And in Remember the Rebellion, it's their story of how they had a shared memory during childhood. And how their life experience pulls them towards each other. And of course, they each meet Margaret, so it makes Margaret thousands of years old.
Yes.
But certainly, I think, that's sort of element of the story in there as well. So all of that is pretty much written. What I'm trying to do at the moment is to blend Karen, or First Council sister, because she's still around, with some of the other main characters. They're all still around as well, and bringing in the things that have happened in our history that are unexplained, and attributing those to Karen and Margaret, and then blending in the 9 saviors as well. So Remember the Rebellion will end when the rebellion itself starts, which will be the final book.
And are you thinking of working on any other books outside of this series, or is it just this one for now?
I mean, for now, yes, it is this one for now, because I find that once I sit down and I start writing just the first couple of sentences, it just grows and grows and grows, and all of a sudden 6 hours is gone. And so, it's time to get up from the chair at that point and have a walk around for a bit. So no, I don't really have a lot of time. Having said that, I still create content online for other people as well, emails and sales pages and all that sort of stuff. But that is thankfully becoming less and less, because I'm working more and more on these books, and they are kind of all encompassing, really, because I want to make a story that people get absorbed into. It's kind of the story that I want people to, when you read a book, the idea really is for you to forget that you're reading, and you're fully immersed into the book as well. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is I try to make the books, and when I write them, as immersively descriptive as possible, so you can kind of see it like a play going on in your mind. So that's kind of my aim as the writer of the book. And of course, consequently, the universe, the world building of Altered Evolution becomes pretty obvious. And what's really interesting is the people I've spoken to about it, they have different views, different visions in their mind, and that's great, because then people are kind of thinking, wow, this is something that's really interesting. How does that happen? They start asking questions, which is perfect. That's exactly what I'm after.
Yeah. And is there a balance you have to do with the detail? Because of course you want it to be descriptive so that people can imagine it, but if you spent a whole page describing a handbag, it could get quite boring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm trying to give people just enough to get the idea of what I'm talking about, and then your own mind fills in the blanks, if you like.
Yes.
So, when you just, I haven't put a very specific description of what these reptilian aliens look like, but, when you say to somebody, oh, it's a reptilian alien, they immediately come up with this picture in their mind of what a reptilian alien potentially looks like. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's really good in that respect. So I've tried not to add too much specific detail, although obviously some needs to go in, but to leave enough to let the reader, imagine. Readers aren't stupid. They understand exactly where the book's going and what's happening, and that's great, because then their mind fills in the theatre in their own minds, if you like.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about books, I suppose. You can write anything. If it was a movie or a TV show, you'd have to actually create what a reptilian alien looks like. Yeah. Whereas with books, you just need the words.
Yeah, absolutely. I want the words to almost vibrate off the page and sort of get absorbed into your mind. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it, really, and that's why I love books. I read a lot anyway, as most writers do. So you can get lost in a world, and it's great escapism. And a story like Altered Evolution that has a kind of a real history, if you like, and there are elements of, I'm not going to say fantasy because it's not really, I'm trying to blend or blur the lines between fantasy and reality, but then there are science fiction elements in there as well. So it's more of a speculative fiction. It's a what if story, and that's what I want people to think, when they finished the Book of Margaret and they're thinking about getting the Remember the Rebellions, to think, well, okay, this could happen. Did this happen? Has that happened?
Yeah.
That's what I'm aiming for.
Well, this book is, of course, called Altered Evolution, the Book of Margaret, and it's by Paul A. Brooks. Where are all the places that we're able to get it?
Right now, it's on Amazon. So it's paperback and also as an ebook as well. I haven't uploaded it anywhere else, although I'm going to be it's going to be on Kobo and Nook and Barnes and Noble and all that sort of stuff. I've just got to stop writing Remember the Rebellion to actually upload the Book of Margaret. So they'll be available on those platforms in the next few days. But it's available right now on Amazon.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.